You don't belong at this table, Marla. You're not even a part of this family anymore. The sentence dropped like a blade, slicing through the polite laughter and clinking cutlery at the long oak dining table. For a moment, the only sound was the scrape of silverware as someone awkwardly adjusted their grip, pretending they hadn't heard what was just said. But everyone had heard it. I had just set down a fresh basket of warm rolls, made from scratch that morning, when the words landed. I stood frozen beside my son, Mason, who was now staring deeply into his wine glass, refusing to meet my eyes. My daughter-in-law, Celine, sat across from me, chin tilted, napkin folded neatly on her lap. Her expression was calm, cold, like she'd simply pointed out the weather. My granddaughter, Lily, blinked rapidly beside her, her hand half lifted toward her water glass, unsure whether to grab it or hide behind it. She was 14, old enough to understand, too young to defend me without consequences. I looked at Celine, then at Mason. He didn't speak. No one did. Not even me. Because I knew if I opened my mouth, the tears would follow. And I refused to cry in front of her. Not in my apron. Not after 3 hours of cooking and a day spent making their house feel like home again for Thanksgiving. So I smiled. I actually smiled. Well, I said, brushing invisible flour off my hands, then I'll clear the table and get dessert ready. Looks like the pie's on me again. I heard a weak chuckle, Lily, trying to soothe the tension. Mason shifted in his seat, uncomfortable, but still silent. And just like that, the moment moved on. Or at least they pretended it had. But I knew better. My name is Marla Jennings. I'm 68 years old. A retired school librarian. A widow. And if you ask my daughter-in-law, an unwanted remnant of a past my son has outgrown. 3 years ago, I sold my house, the one Mason grew up in, after his father passed. He offered to have me move in just until things stabilized. But things never stabilized. They shifted. They shrunk. One boundary at a time. First it was, don't worry about the groceries, Mom. We have our own rhythm. Then it was, oh, we already have a plan for dinner tonight. Why don't you relax upstairs? And then, the laundry room gets crowded, Mom. Just leave your things in a bin. We'll take care of it. A slow erasure. Polite at first, then firm, then final. Celine never yelled. That would be too direct. She just delegated me out of the life I helped build. That night, after the dishes were done and the leftovers stored, I stood at the edge of the hallway listening to them talk in the living room. My name never came up, but my presence hovered like smoke in a sealed room. She's just always here, Celine said, her voice hushed but not soft. She's my mother, Mason replied, weary. I know. And I'm not saying kick her out. Just, we have a life, Mason. A rhythm. It's like I can't breathe in my own home anymore. He didn't defend me. He didn't say, she has nowhere else to go. He just said, I'll talk to her. I walked back to the guest room, the one that used to be Mason's office before I arrived. My suitcase was still in the closet. I hadn't unpacked everything. I never did. I sat on the edge of the narrow daybed and let the silence crawl over me like a blanket soaked in cold water. This was not how it was supposed to go. I had been the kind of mother who stayed up with him during science fair projects, who worked double shifts after Henry lost his job, who skipped vacations so Mason could attend summer music camps. I kept every drawing, every award, every story he scribbled in crayon. I was the safe place, the one constant. And now I was the burden. Not a guest, not family, just an extra plate at the table. I looked at the framed photo on the nightstand. Mason at age 6, covered in cake frosting, arms around my neck. He used to say, Mom, if you were a superhero, your power would be hugs. I still remembered that day. We'd eaten cake on the back porch, Henry snapping pictures on an old Canon while we all laughed until our sides ached. Now my son couldn't meet my eyes when his wife insulted me in front of our granddaughter. The next morning, I woke before anyone else. I crept quietly to the front door, slipped on my coat, and walked 3 blocks to the library. It was closed, of course, but I didn't go for books. I went for the bench near the statue in the small garden, my favorite spot in the world. It was where Henry first kissed me, where Mason had learned to read, where I'd eaten lunches during lonely shifts before retirement. The wind was brisk, tugging at my scarf. But the cold didn't bother me. I needed clarity. And the truth hit hard. I couldn't live like this anymore. Not out of pride. Out of necessity. I had shrunk myself enough times in this life. Folded myself into smaller and smaller boxes to make others more comfortable. But I wasn't going to disappear completely. Not this time. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the folded document I'd kept hidden since Henry's passing, a sealed envelope from our lawyer, marked for Marla only. I had never opened it. Henry had mentioned it in passing before his final hospital stay. Just something I set aside in case you ever needed to stand on your own. At the time, I'd brushed it off. Now, I broke the seal. Inside was a letter, scrawled in his uneven handwriting. If you're reading this, then life didn't go as planned. But I want you to know, Marla, you're not just taken care of. You're empowered. That plot of land on Weaver Hill, the one my uncle left us, it's still in your name. I never told Mason. I figured if you ever needed it, you'd find your way to it. Just promise me one thing. You'll use it for yourself. Not for them. For you. My hands trembled. Not from the cold. From the shift I felt begin in my bones. I had land. Legal land. Valuable land. And suddenly, I had choices. I stood up, stuffed the letter into my coat, and walked home with a new kind of fire in my chest. They didn't know it yet, but something had changed. Not loud. Not dramatic. But like the first crack of dawn after a long, frozen night. I was done waiting. Before we continue, take a moment to let me know where you're watching from in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe to more powerful stories like this one. I didn't return home with fanfare or fury. I walked back through the front door like I always did, softly, respectfully, as though I needed permission to exist. That was the last day I'd ever enter a house pretending I didn't. Mason was in the kitchen, putting away coffee mugs, already dressed for work. He looked surprised to see me back so early. "You went out?" he asked, not unkind but cautious. "Just a walk," I said, hanging my coat with care. I needed the air. He nodded, rubbing the back of his neck. "Look, about yesterday," his voice trailed off. I waited, giving him a chance to finish. "She didn't mean it like that," he finally muttered. There it was. The familiar shield of excuse. I offered him a polite smile. "Of course she didn't." He relaxed slightly, mistaking my civility for compliance. "I'll talk to her," he said, as though that solved anything. I didn't answer. Instead, I asked, "Is it all right if I use the car this morning?" He blinked. "You have somewhere to go?" "I do." He hesitated, keys in hand. "You don't have to go anywhere, Mom." "But I want to," I replied. And that's reason enough. 10 minutes later, I was driving toward the county office building, envelope still in my coat pocket like a secret weapon. My palms were damp on the steering wheel, but my spine stayed straight. I was going to find out just how much this plot of land, my land, was worth. The receptionist at the county records desk was a young woman with red-framed glasses and a name tag that read Danny. She barely looked up when I approached. "I'm trying to access some property records," I said, slipping the envelope onto the counter. She took it, opened it, and her brows lifted. "Weaver Hill? You own that?" "I believe I do." She typed something quickly, paused, then looked at me fully for the first time. "That's some hot ground right now. Developers have been sniffing around those parcels for months. There's a new community project proposal slated for that ridge." She flipped the screen toward me. Satellite images. Zoning proposals. Color-coded land values. Yours hasn't been touched. It's still under Marla Jennings. Still under me. I swallowed hard. "What's it worth?" She typed again, printed a document, and circled a number in bold. $890,000. It hit me like a gust of wind to the chest. I had been folding someone else's laundry, hiding in a corner of my son's life, when I had nearly $1 million of soil and pine trees sitting under my name this whole time. "I need a copy of everything," I said. She smiled. already printing. By noon, I was sitting at a diner with a cup of coffee and a folder full of possibilities. I stared at the documents, the land survey, the value estimates. But it wasn't the number that shook me most. It was the freedom. For years, I had believed my worth came from being useful, being needed. I had allowed myself to become invisible because I thought that was what aging meant, fading gracefully. But as I looked at the bold letters of my name on that deed, I remembered the woman I used to be. The one who organized library fundraisers, stood in front of school boards, fought for literacy programs, and never let anyone steamroll her. That woman hadn't disappeared. She'd just been buried beneath politeness and obligation. It was time to dig her back up. Back at the house, Celine was in the dining room with her laptop and swatches of fabric spread out like a planning session for a showroom. Mason was gone for the day. She didn't look up when I walked in. "I picked up some mail for you," I said, placing a few letters beside her. She glanced at them disinterestedly. I waited a beat. "I'll be moving out," I said, calm and clean. Her head snapped up. "What?" I said, "I'll be moving out. Probably by the end of next month." She blinked, stunned. "Why?" "I think it's time." "You can't be serious." "I'm quite serious." Her jaw twitched. "Where are you going to go?" I smiled, tucking the property folder tighter under my arm. "Somewhere quieter. I need space to breathe." Celine stood up abruptly, her tone tightening. "Is this because of what I said yesterday?" "That was exactly what you meant," I interrupted, still pleasant. "And it gave me the clarity I needed." Her lips parted, but no words came out. I could see her struggling, torn between curiosity and indignation. "I'll start packing this weekend," I added. "Please don't worry about helping." I turned and walked to the guest room, no longer a place of exile, but now a war room for freedom. I laid the documents out on the bed like a general planning her campaign. I called a lawyer next, not the one Henry had used, the man who barely made eye contact during the estate paperwork, but a woman I remembered from a library fundraiser, Arlene Santos. She'd once helped a local teacher get out of an unfair housing dispute. Kind, sharp, and loyal. She remembered me. "You helped get my daughter her first job," she said warmly. "What can I do for you, Mrs. Jennings?" "I want to sell some land," I said. "And I want to make sure I do it right, without anyone else touching it." "I'm listening." That night, I skipped dinner. I wasn't hungry. I was alive. I sat in the guest room with my phone hotspot turned on and mapped out what it would cost to build a home. Nothing big, just something that was mine. A wraparound porch, a fireplace, a kitchen with wide counters for kneading dough from scratch. I wrote down 3 words and circled them over and over. Light, space, peace. By midnight, I had a vision. By morning, I had made another call, this time to a local builder I'd once worked with during a school library remodel. He remembered me, too. "We don't usually do private homes, Marla," he said, "but for you, I'll make time." Within 72 hours, I had a contract in draft. Within 7 days, I had a plan. The following Sunday, during breakfast, Celine casually asked if I'd be interested in moving into one of the nearby senior condos. "Might be easier," she said, flipping through her tablet. "No yard maintenance. And there's a community shuttle." I poured my tea calmly. "That won't be necessary. I've found a different place." "Oh, yes," I said, smiling softly. "I'm building a house." She paused, visibly thrown. "You're building?" "I am." Her eyes flicked toward Mason, who had just walked in with the paper. "You're building a house," he repeated, confused. I nodded. "With what money?" I set down my teacup and met his gaze squarely. "From a part of my life you both forgot I still owned." The moving truck arrived on a Tuesday morning, quiet and efficient. I had already boxed most of my belongings, what little I had unpacked during my 3 years in Mason and Celine's house. A few suitcases, some framed photos, my favorite cookbooks, the hand-stitched quilt from Henry's mother. I didn't have much anymore, but what I had was mine. Celine stood by the kitchen island with a smoothie in hand, watching the movers shuffle past her as though they were part of a street performance she hadn't bought tickets for. Her expression was unreadable, but her lips were tight. "I just don't understand why all of a sudden," she said. "We've tried to make space for you, haven't we?" It was almost funny, hearing the revisionist history spoken aloud. I didn't take the bait. I didn't need to. The truck spoke for me. "You've made it clear I've overstayed," I said softly, taping the last box shut. "This isn't sudden, Celine. It's overdue." She folded her arms, leaning back like a courtroom lawyer waiting for a confession. "And this mystery house? You really expect us to believe you just decided to build a home out of the blue?" I met her gaze calmly. "I don't expect you to believe anything. That's the difference now." Before she could respond, Mason walked in from the garage. He looked tired, not physically, but like something in him was dimming and hadn't quite realized it yet. "Mom," he said, trying to smile. "Are you sure about this?" "Yes. You can stay." "Really?" I placed the sealed box near the door. "I know I can stay, Mason. But I'm choosing to go. That's something I haven't done in a long time. Choose." He nodded slowly, glancing between me and Celine. "Where are you building anyway?" "Out near Weaver Hill," I said. Celine stiffened. "Developers are circling out there," she said, too quickly. "That land's going to be swallowed up by expansion in the next 5 years." "Then I picked the perfect time," I replied. Her eyes narrowed. I could see it, the gears turning. She hadn't known. Neither of them had. That land had always been dismissed as worthless, forgotten, sentimental at best. But now that I was building on it, it was valuable. Suddenly, I wasn't a burden. I was leverage. Good. Let them underestimate me. That was the last mistake they'd get to make. The first day I stood on the cleared lot at Weaver Hill, wind tugging at my scarf and the hum of machinery behind me, I felt something lift. Not pride. Not triumph. Relief. The builder, Greg, the one I had helped fundraise for a decade ago, walked me through the plans. "We've got everything locked in: plumbing, foundation, energy-efficient build, single-level, accessible entryway." He handed me a folder with material samples. "And the porch you asked for, the wraparound with the view of the pines, we can do that in time for spring." I ran my fingers over the blueprints like they were a love letter. "I don't need much," I told him. "Just enough to breathe." "You'll have more than that," he said. "You'll have peace." For weeks, I split my time between a small temporary rental and site visits. I picked paint colors, floor textures, kitchen tile. I made decisions. I took up space again, after years of shrinking. I stopped checking my phone for Mason's texts. I stopped wondering what Celine was whispering in the background of their conversations. They didn't reach out. Not really. Except once. Mason sent a message 2 weeks after I moved out. "Just checking in. Hope the new place is coming along. Lily misses you." I replied with a photo of the rosemary plant I had bought for my future garden. No words. Just the image. He didn't respond. Then came the offer. A thick envelope delivered by courier. Inside, a polished letterhead with an aggressive smile. "Langston and Burke Development Firm. An offer of $1.2 million for the land, contingent on project access and zoning permissions." My land. The letter was wrapped in velvet wording. "We've admired your bold decision to build on this parcel, and we're confident that this proposal will allow you to enjoy early retirement benefits while contributing to the long-term growth of this region." I nearly laughed. Early retirement? I had been retired for 6 years. I wasn't building a home for money. I was building it to matter. At the bottom of the letter, printed discreetly in small type. "Prepared in collaboration with Senior Strategy Advisor, Celine Marshall." Of course. Celine. She hadn't just underestimated me. She'd tried to outflank me. I was building a home, and she wanted to buy it out from under me before the walls were even up. I brought the letter to Arlene. She skimmed it with a deepening frown. "They think they're clever. Offering before the home is complete, trying to catch you while you still feel uncertain." "But I'm not uncertain," I said. "Good. Because this is a long con, Marla. And they're betting on your silence." I shook my head. "They don't know who they're betting against." She leaned back, smirking. Then let's make sure they find out. We began drafting a formal response, not just a refusal, but a notice of intent. I wanted to lock down a preservation clause, something that would protect the land from corporate acquisition even after I was gone. I wouldn't just say no. I'd make it impossible for them to ask again. 3 days later, my phone rang. Mason. I hesitated before picking up. Mom, he said, voice low. We got a letter from your lawyer. I'm aware. Celine says. I know what Celine says. Silence. You really want to block all development on that land? I want to live without being bought, I said. Is that so hard to understand? More silence. Then, she was just trying to help. She knows a lot of people. She thought she could negotiate something better for you. No, I said sharply. She thought she could take something from me quietly. I don't think she meant it like that. Then tell her to speak to me directly. Another pause. She won't. I didn't think so. I waited a moment. Then, softer. Tell Lily I'll call her this weekend. I will. We hung up. And just like that, the air around me changed. Thinned. Something was shifting. They thought they could erase me from my own story. They thought they could buy me out before I realized the power I held. But I was no longer the woman clearing dishes while they debated my usefulness. I was the woman signing construction contracts, locking legal clauses, planting rosemary. And I was just getting started. The day the front door was installed on my new home, I stood on the gravel path, watching two men carefully ease the mahogany slab into place. It was heavier than I expected, solid and warm, with a deep grain like old tree rings. I had chosen it myself, stained a rich chestnut, fitted with a bronze handle and a single glass panel at the top. A door like that said something. It didn't whisper. It didn't beg to be allowed. It welcomed, on its own terms. Greg, my builder, walked over and handed me the keys, still warm from his pocket. You want to do the honors? He asked, his expression kind. I took them without hesitation. The metal clicked in the lock, smooth, precise. When it opened, I stepped inside. No creaking floorboards yet. No family photos on the walls. No kettle hissing on the stove. Just the smell of sawdust and new beginnings. I closed the door behind me, slowly. And for the first time in years, I didn't flinch at the sound of it shutting. The following week passed in focused rhythm. Measurements. Installations. Deliveries. I had a say in everything, from the stone around the fireplace to the shape of the pantry shelves. People kept commenting on how calm I seemed. But it wasn't calm. It was clarity. And that clarity only deepened the day the county clerk called me directly. I just wanted to confirm the language on the land preservation clause, she said. You're locking down your entire parcel, correct? Even after sale or transfer. That's correct. And you're naming the residence as your permanent homestead? Yes. She paused. You're sure? I've never been sure of anything. I hung up and sat by the kitchen island, a slab of maple I'd chosen specifically because it reminded me of the library circulation desk I once ruled over like a queen. And I laughed. Not cruelly, not bitterly, just joyfully, because I was no longer reacting. I was authoring. And this time I held the pen. The next confrontation came sooner than I expected. A black Lexus pulled into my gravel driveway on a Friday afternoon. The tires crunched like someone trying to sneak into church wearing heels. I was standing on the porch, arranging small potted herbs, lavender, basil, thyme. The door opened before the car fully stopped. Celine stepped out, all sharp lines and crisp intention, wearing sunglasses despite the overcast sky. She moved like a woman walking into a boardroom, not a home she hadn't helped build. Rose, she said flatly. Celine. Her eyes darted over the porch swing, the trim, the glass-paneled front door. All of it annoyed her, because none of it needed her. She stepped up onto the first stair, stopping just shy of the threshold. You could have told me about the land, she said. I didn't realize I owed you a report. You've lived under our roof for almost 3 years, and paid rent every single one of them, even when you insisted I didn't need to. I saved the receipts, Celine. You can check your own Venmo history." Her lips tightened. She was used to controlling the tone of conversations. This one was slipping away. "You've made things very complicated," she said, changing tactics. "For who?" "For the development firm. For our family." I knelt beside the herb pots and began adjusting the soil. "You mean for your firm? Let's not pretend this is about the community." She crossed her arms. "You do realize this property could serve more people than just you. Low-income housing. Senior accessibility programs. We're not the enemy, Rose. We're progress." I stood, wiping dirt from my hands. "Progress isn't always what you bulldoze through, Celine. Sometimes progress is what you preserve." A woman finally having something that belongs to her? That's progress. She scoffed, low and bitter. "You've made yourself into a martyr." "No," I said evenly. "I made myself a home." She looked past me, through the open doorway, where the bare walls waited for art, where the fireplace stood half-finished, where light spilled through the tall windows onto the polished floors. "You'll regret this," she said quietly. I took a deep breath and said, "Maybe. But at least if I do, it'll be my regret, not one assigned to me." Her mask slipped then, just a crack. A flicker of something beneath the veneer. Not anger. Not control. Loneliness. Then she turned and walked back to the car. She didn't say goodbye. I didn't need her to. That evening, I pulled out the old wooden box I kept locked in my rental's dresser drawer. Inside were the pieces of my past that mattered. Henry's favorite tie. Mason's handmade card from the 3rd grade. My original teaching certificate. And tucked beneath all of it, a small envelope with my name written in Lily's handwriting. Grandma Rose. I opened it again, reading the words I already knew by heart. She missed me. She still wanted to plant that rosemary bush. I pressed the note to my lips and smiled. Maybe some bridges could still be rebuilt, not with apologies or plans, but with soil, roots, and slow-growing trust. The next morning, I stopped by a local nursery and bought a second rosemary plant. This one wasn't for my porch. This one was for Lily's. I didn't text Mason. I didn't ask for permission. I simply showed up. Celine wasn't home. Thank God. Mason answered the door with surprise written all over his face. "Mom, is Lily here?" He nodded, stepping aside. She came down the stairs in socks, her long hair braided, a smear of paint on her cheek. Probably from an art project. She froze when she saw me, then ran forward and hugged me like a child half her age. "I brought something," I said, holding out the pot. Her eyes lit up. "Is that for me?" "It's for us," I corrected. "You said you saved a spot." She smiled, that dimple of hers peeking through. "I did." We went out to the backyard, where a small patch of earth had been cleared near the fence. I knelt with her, hands in the soil, while Mason stood by the window, watching from behind the glass. She pressed her hands into the dirt gently, firming the base. "Do you think it'll grow?" I looked at her, so earnest, so hopeful. "It already is." And in that moment, kneeling beside her, the earth beneath our hands and the scent of rosemary filling the air, I realized something else. The house wasn't the end of the story. It was only the beginning. The scent of sawdust still lingered in my new home, mixed with lemon oil and the faintest trace of lavender from the sachets I had tucked into the linen drawers. My furniture had arrived, piece by piece, most of it secondhand, but chosen with care. I didn't want a showroom. I wanted warmth. Character. Stories etched into wood and fabric. I was sitting in my reading chair, a deep armchair I'd bought for $20 at a church auction, when the second offer came. Delivered in an envelope so glossy it practically screamed important, the new proposal was nearly double the last, $2.1 million. Accompanied by a slick brochure and a personal note handwritten by a man named Gregory Langston himself, CEO of Langston and Burke Development. "We admire your independence and vision. We'd love to partner with you. Consider this a collaborative opportunity, not a buyout." I smiled when I read that part. A collaborative opportunity? What they meant was, "We underestimated you. Now we're trying a different mask." I placed the letter on the kitchen counter beside a fresh loaf of bread I'd pulled from the oven that morning.
Warm. Soft.
Honest. The letter looked ridiculous next to it. I drove straight to Arlene's office without calling. She greeted me with a knowing look. "Let me guess," she said. "They've started using flattery instead of force." I handed her the envelope. "They're calling it collaboration now." She opened it, scanned it, then rolled her eyes. "Gregory Langston's signature is a scare tactic. The money's real, but the respect isn't. I want to make sure they stop circling," I said. "I want to cut them off at the knees. Then we solidify the preservation. I'll push the filing to state level. That'll put this property in a protection tier. No private redevelopment. No flips. Not even if your heirs want to sell." I thought for a moment. "Good," I said. She raised a brow. "You're certain?" I nodded. "Let them build their luxury complexes somewhere else. I'm building a life here." Arlene grinned. "You've got fire, Marla. It's about time someone made them sweat." That evening, I received a text from Mason. "Heard from Lily that you visited. She was happy. Just wanted to say thanks."
Short.
Hesitant. But it was something. I responded with a single line. "She has your heart, Mason. Don't let anyone harden it." No reply came, but I hadn't expected one. On Sunday morning, I made tea and took it out to the porch. The rosemary bush sat in its large ceramic planter near the steps. Growing strong. Resilient. I was halfway through a chapter of a book when a car pulled into the driveway. Not the Lexus this time. It was Mason's pickup. He stepped out slowly, hands in his jacket pockets, scanning the house like he'd never really seen it until now. I stayed seated. He climbed the porch steps and paused. "It's beautiful, Mom. Thank you." He sat down on the swing, glancing at the garden beds I'd started carving out near the fence. "You did all this alone?" I smiled faintly. "Not alone, but on my own terms." He nodded. Silence stretched between us. Finally, he said, "Celine's not happy. She rarely is when she's not in control." He didn't argue. That surprised me. "She's not a bad person," he added quietly. "Just driven." "Driven to erase me?" His shoulders tensed.
No.
"To prove she belongs. To be more than she was raised to be." I looked at him. "You think I don't understand that?" He finally met my eyes. And maybe for the first time in years, he saw me not just as his mother, not as the extra plate at the table, but as a woman with her own story. Her own climb. "I should have stood up for you that night," he said. "At the table." "Yes," I said softly. "You should have." He looked away, ashamed. But I didn't want to hurt him. I just needed him to know that silence was a choice. And it had consequences. "I can't change that," he said. "No," I replied. "But you can stop pretending it didn't happen." He nodded. "Do you want to come for dinner next week?" "Just us. Lily wants to cook for you again." I considered it. Then I said, "Yes, but not at your house." He frowned. "At mine," I said firmly. "Next Saturday. 6 o'clock. Tell Lily to bring her apron." He smiled just a little. "Okay." He stood, glanced around again. "Celine won't like it." "I'm not living for Celine's approval anymore," I said. "The rules don't apply to me the way they used to." And with that, he left. No long goodbye, but something lighter in his step. Something beginning. After he drove off, I returned to my reading chair, picked up my book, and for the first time since that Thanksgiving night, since the words, "You don't belong at this table," landed like a hammer in my chest, I felt something shift inside me. I did belong. Not just at a table, but at the head of it. And next Saturday, I would be the one serving the meal. On my own plates. In my own house. With a story they'd all be sitting in the middle of, even if they didn't realize it yet. The roast went into the oven at 3 p.m. sharp. Red potatoes, rosemary sprigs from the porch, carrots with a brown sugar glaze, everything slow-cooked, rich, unapologetically mine. I set the table with mismatched china I'd collected from flea markets over the years, each plate a little different, just like the people they were meant for. No polished perfection, just warmth. By 5:30, the scent of garlic and thyme floated through the house like a welcome. the kind of smell that could break down walls people didn't know they'd built. I stood back, wiped my hands on my apron, and took in the scene: candles flickering, linen napkins folded with a sprig of lavender tucked into each one. Then I sat in my reading chair to wait. At 5:57, I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. Lily was the first through the door, holding a casserole dish and wearing an apron far too big for her. She ran straight to me and threw her arms around my waist. "Grandma, it smells amazing." Mason followed, smiling sheepishly, holding a bottle of wine. "We didn't know what to bring." "Yourselves," I said. "And you did." Then came the surprise.
Celine.
Trailing a few steps behind, holding a small bouquet of white tulips. I raised a brow, but said nothing. She extended them awkwardly. "From Lily," she said. She insisted. Lily scowled. "That's not true. You picked those." Celine glanced at her daughter, clearly caught off guard. "I took the flowers anyway." "Thank you." We sat at the table. No grand speeches. No small talk about renovations or promotions. Just food, conversation, the clink of glasses. And for the first time in years, I saw Mason relax. I saw Lily beam. And I saw Celine study me, not as a threat, but as something she didn't quite know how to name. When dessert came, apple crumble without topping and cream, Lily leaned close and said, "This tastes like your old kitchen." That hit harder than I expected. "I use the same pan," I said softly. After the dishes were cleared, we all drifted to the porch. The evening was quiet, wind rustling through the pines. I served chamomile tea in old mugs with faded lettering. Celine sipped hers in silence. Then, without looking up, she said, "I read the preservation notice you filed. You didn't have to go that far." I didn't reply right away. "I did," I said finally, "because if I left even a crack open, someone would try to widen it." She turned her mug in her hands. "You think that someone would have been me." "I know it."
She didn't argue.
For once, she didn't spin. "I grew up believing control was the same as safety," she said suddenly. "That if I could steer everything, nothing could fall apart." I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. "You scare me, Marla," she admitted. "Not because you're forceful, but because you don't ask anyone's permission." I took a sip of tea. "I used to ask for everything," I said.
Space. Time.
Kindness. Until I stopped. And the world didn't end. She stared ahead at the horizon, the sky turning violet with dusk. "I don't know how to be soft," she said. "You're not required to be soft," I replied. "But you are required to stop hurting people just to stay sharp." Silence again. But not the heavy kind. The growing kind. After they left, Lily was the last to hug me. "Next time, can I bring dessert?" she asked. "Only if you make it from scratch." She grinned.
Deal.
Celine offered a parting nod from the passenger seat. Mason gave a small wave. And just like that, they were gone. Later that week, I received a letter in the mail, not from a lawyer, or a developer, or even the county board. It was handwritten. From Celine. "Thank you for dinner. I don't know if I deserve a seat at your table, but I'm glad I got one. I'm still learning how to speak without defense. Lily says I should listen more. I think she's right. If you ever want to come over and teach her how to make your crumble, I promise to just observe and maybe wash the dishes. Celine." I stared at the note for a long time. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She offered humility. That mattered. The next weekend, I stopped by with a basket of apples and a jar of cinnamon. Lily met me at the door in flower-covered jeans. Celine stayed at the edge of the kitchen, quiet, present, respectful. She didn't hover.
She didn't correct.
She let me lead. And when Lily spilled brown sugar across the counter, Celine didn't sigh. She laughed. And that's when I realized, healing doesn't start with apologies. It starts with witnessing. She had sat at my table. And now, for the first time, she was letting me stand in her kitchen. The town newsletter arrived midweek, folded neatly inside my mailbox with the usual circulars and real estate ads. I almost didn't notice it until I saw the headline printed across the top. "Weaver Hill development delayed indefinitely. Historic holdout claims victory. And beneath it, a photo of my house. It wasn't a flattering shot. Taken from a distance, likely without permission. The rosemary bush was barely visible. The garden beds hadn't yet bloomed. But the caption was worse. Despite community pushback, Marla Jennings remains unmoved, filing preservation blocks against the proposed senior housing expansion. Some say she's protecting legacy. Others say she's just protecting herself. Protecting myself? I sat down at my kitchen table and read the article twice. They quoted anonymous sources. They cited a missed opportunity for affordable housing. They referenced Langston and Burke's frustrated but respectful withdrawal from the negotiation process. Nowhere in the article did it mention the earlier buyout attempt. Nowhere did it mention that the project wasn't affordable housing at all. It was a private luxury development with only token low-income units planned. Nowhere did it mention Celine. I folded the paper in half, calmly, then tore it down the center and fed it into the trash. I wasn't angry. Not exactly. I was done being silent. The town hall was already scheduled, one of their open forums where citizens could air grievances or ask questions of council members. It was supposed to be about school funding, but word got out. By the time I arrived, the chairs were full. People stood along the walls. Some of them I recognized, neighbors, old colleagues, church acquaintances. Some I didn't. A murmur ran through the crowd when I walked in. I wore blue, the same soft linen dress I had worn at the dinner with Mason and Celine. Hair up. No makeup. I didn't need to perform. I signed my name on the speaker list. 6th. The first few voices were familiar. A mother asking about school meal programs. A teenager lobbying for safer bike lanes. A man irritated about potholes. Then came a woman I didn't recognize, standing with her shoulders squared, holding a copy of the same newsletter I'd thrown away. "I want to talk about this," she said, waving the paper. "This kind of selfishness. This refusal to allow growth." She never said my name.
She didn't have to.
Her voice rose. One person shouldn't be allowed to hold back an entire community. That old feeling crept up my spine, the one I'd swallowed so many times before.
Shame.
Not guilt. Just the residue of being watched, judged, labeled. Then my name was called. Marla Jennings? I stood and walked to the front. No one clapped. No one whispered. The room waited. "I didn't plan on speaking tonight," I began. "But I suppose I've been spoken for enough times." A few people shifted in their seats. "My name is Marla Jennings.
Some of you know me.
I taught in this town for 31 years. I shelved books at the public library. I helped organize the literacy fair. I sold cookies for your kids' fundraisers." I paused. "And I built a house. On land left to me. Land that was mine legally, emotionally, and historically." I let that sink in. What's happening now, the articles, the criticism, the backhanded shame, it's not about housing. It's about control. It's about punishing a woman who stopped being quiet. Murmurs now. I lifted the folded proposal printout from my purse and held it up. This is the development plan everyone's talking about. This is what I said no to. I flipped it to the highlighted portion. Out of the 62 planned units, only 4 were classified as affordable housing. The rest were luxury townhomes and short-term rentals. This wasn't about community. It was about profit. Now heads turned. Whispers grew louder. And the person who crafted this plan, I added, my voice steady, was my daughter-in-law. She never disclosed her relationship to me when filing. She never acknowledged the conflict of interest. I stepped back from the mic, slightly. I don't owe anyone my land. And I certainly don't owe anyone my silence. I looked around the room, into the faces of people who had once pitied me, dismissed me, or politely excluded me. Call me selfish if you need to, but don't confuse selfishness with refusing to disappear quietly. Then I stepped down. They didn't clap, but no one else stood to speak after me. Outside the building, the evening was cool. I walked to my car with slow, deliberate steps. That's when I heard her. "Marla." I turned. "Celine." She jogged toward me, heels clicking across the pavement. What the hell was that? She snapped. You ambushed me in front of the town. You ambushed yourself, I said, unlocking my car door. You built the plan. You hid your name. You spun the press. I was trying to help the firm. You were trying to erase me. Again. She hesitated. Her jaw clenched. You didn't have to mention me by name. I didn't, I said calmly. You did that all by yourself. She stood there, breath shallow, fury flickering beneath her perfectly composed surface. And for the first time, I didn't see a threat. I saw a woman standing in the shards of her broken mirror. Realizing the reflection she spent her life polishing had started to crack. Celine, I said gently, this was never about the land. It was about you needing the last word. She looked away, blinking hard. I have no more words for you, she whispered. Then maybe it's time you start listening. I got in the car, and I left her there, in the quiet, where I had once lived for far too long. It rained the morning after the town hall meeting. Not a storm, not the kind of rain that drowns things. Just a steady, soft drizzle, like the sky letting out a long breath after holding it for too long. I watched it from the porch, wrapped in Henry's old cardigan, mug of coffee warm between my palms. The rosemary bush shimmered beneath the moisture, standing tall in its pot like it had something to say. I hadn't heard from Mason. Not a call, not a text, not even a "Mom, are you okay?" message sent out of obligation. But I didn't feel abandoned. Not anymore. The silence wasn't an indictment. It was a pause. And I'd lived through worse. I spent the morning cleaning the house, not because it needed it, but because I liked the feeling of keeping something alive with my hands. I folded laundry that still smelled of lavender. I straightened the photos I'd framed last week. One of me and Mason when he was 6, both of us covered in mud at the county fair. One of Lily, holding a library card with her name printed in bold. When I opened the pantry to put away a bag of rice, I found it. A note. Folded, wedged between a jar of oats and a tin of tea. I unfolded it slowly. Grandma Rose, I'm proud of you. Not just for saying what you said at the town thing, but for building something real. I want to grow up to be brave like that. I love you. Lily. My hand went to my chest, as if something inside me had cracked open. Not broken, opened. It was small. A note on lined paper in loopy handwriting. But it was the most honest thing I'd received in years. 2 days later, Mason came by. Unannounced. No warning text. Just his truck in the driveway, and that old nervous knock on my door. I opened it. He stood there in the rain, holding a grocery bag. I brought the apples you like, he said. For the crumble. I stepped aside. He came in, soaked at the shoulders, and set the bag down on the counter. For a while, we didn't say much. I made tea. He stood by the window, looking out at the rosemary bush. She still hasn't forgiven me, he said finally.
Who?
I asked, even though I knew. Celine. I stirred honey into the mugs. That's her decision to make.
He turned.
She thinks you humiliated her. I told the truth. He nodded, slow and quiet. You did. We sat at the table. The same one I had chosen not for style, but for the way it reminded me of Sunday mornings before the world got complicated.
She was scared, he said.
Of losing everything she worked for. I sipped my tea. So was I. But I didn't use you as a shield to keep myself safe. He flinched. Not harshly. Just honestly.
I let you down, he said.
Yes. I'm sorry. I looked at him, really looked.
His hair thinning now.
Creases near his eyes. The same boy who used to draw rocket ships on napkins and tuck them into my purse. The man who'd grown into something quieter.
Smaller.
Not out of malice, but out of learned survival. I forgive you, I said. But I'm not shrinking again to make space for someone else's comfort. He nodded. You don't have to. We sat in silence after that. But it wasn't cold. It wasn't tense. It was shared. And when he stood to leave, I reached into the fruit bowl and handed him an orange. For Lily, I said. He smiled. She'll love that. Before he left, he turned back to me. She wants to come stay a weekend soon. With you. Is that okay? My chest swelled. Of course. He hesitated again. Even if Celine's not ready? I stepped forward, placing a hand on his shoulder. She doesn't need to be ready for me to move forward. That weekend, I planted the second rosemary bush, Lily's bush, in the small garden patch just beyond the porch. She helped, of course, digging with two small gloves, face smudged with dirt, laughing the whole time. "This one's mine," she said, patting the soil gently. "But it's still part of yours, too." I smiled. "That's how families work, sweetheart." Later, after dinner and too much chocolate cake, she curled up beside me in the reading chair, both of us wrapped in the old quilt. "Grandma?" "Yes." "Why didn't you sell the house when they offered all that money?" I brushed her hair back from her forehead. "Because money can build walls," I said. "But it doesn't build home." She nodded like she understood. And I think she did. Even at 13. Especially at 13. On Sunday night, when I dropped her off, Celine was waiting at the door. Not in her usual polished perfection. Hair up, barefoot, wearing an old sweatshirt that didn't quite fit her right. She looked tired. Not from battle. From trying to be less of a warrior. "Did she behave?" she asked. I smiled. "She's perfect." Lily hugged me tight. "Love you. Love you more." She ran inside. Celine lingered on the porch. Then, barely above a whisper, "Thank you." "For what?" "For not making her choose." I paused. Then said, "Children should never be asked to choose between love and loyalty. They should be surrounded by both." We stood there in silence. And for the first time, I didn't feel like we were on opposite sides of a war. We were just two women, different seasons of life, same weather-beaten hearts, trying to do better. She nodded once, turned, and went inside. I walked back to my car. It was quiet on the drive home. But this time, the silence wasn't heavy. It was full of roots, growing deeper. And I was finally ready to bloom. The rosemary was blooming. Tiny pale blue flowers had sprouted between the thick, fragrant leaves, reaching toward the sun like they'd never known anything but care. I stood over the garden, trowel in hand, soft dirt under my knees, marveling at how something so small could grow with such boldness. Lily's bush had flourished too. Hers grew faster, wider, wild and slightly crooked, like her laughter. I loved them both. The garden was no longer a placeholder. It was a record of what had survived, of what had chosen to thrive. The house was mine. Fully, quietly, undeniably. No one asked questions about why I was here. No one tried to minimize the story behind my walls. I had become not just a resident, but a landmark. Some people stopped calling me the holdout on Weaver Hill. They started calling me the woman who built her house anyway. I received a letter that morning. Not a legal envelope. Not an offer. Not a complaint. Just a square cream card with gold edges. An invitation. "You are formally invited to speak at the Women's Legacy Luncheon, sponsored by the Pine Valley Historical Society. Topic: When starting over isn't starting from nothing." I chuckled when I read it. Apparently, word had spread farther than I thought. I wasn't just the woman who said no to developers anymore. I was a symbol. Of what? Resilience. Self-definition. Quiet power. I hadn't planned to say yes. But something inside me stirred, something younger. Braver. The part of me that had once stood before classrooms, telling wide-eyed children that their stories mattered, even when no one clapped. So I sent back a reply. Gladly. Marla Jennings. The event was small. Understated. Tea sandwiches. Folding chairs. White tablecloths that fluttered under ceiling fans. But every seat was filled. Women of all ages. Some in pearls. Some in paint-streaked jeans. Some holding notebooks. When they called my name, I walked to the front of the room in a navy dress, silver chain at my throat, hands steady. I took a breath. And I told the truth. I didn't set out to make a statement. I began. I set out to make a home. One that no one could take from me, not because of money or power or public opinion, but because I knew I deserved to exist fully in a space that didn't apologize for me. The room held its breath. I was told I was an extra, an inconvenience, that my presence was something to be managed, not embraced. But I stayed long enough to learn that the people who try to erase you usually fear the space you take up. I smiled. I built this house not out of spite, but out of memory, out of legacy, out of love for myself, for my granddaughter, for every woman who was ever told she should shrink. There was silence when I finished. Then the applause came. Not thunderous, but sustained.
Real.
And for the first time, I didn't feel like I had to earn it. A week later, Lily brought her science project to show me. It was a trifold board with cutout images of famous women in history, lines of text, and in the middle, taped carefully, was a photo of my house. At the top in thick marker, my hero, Grandma Rose. "I hope that's okay," she said, almost shy. The teacher said it should be someone who stood up for herself. I didn't answer right away. I was too busy trying not to cry. Finally, I placed my hands on her shoulders and said, "It's more than okay. It's everything." She smiled. "Next year I'm doing you again. But I'm adding the rosemary bushes." That night, I walked through my home slowly. My fingers brushed the edge of the kitchen counter, the bookshelf, the arm of the reading chair. I opened the back door and stepped onto the porch, letting the breeze lift my hair. It was quiet, but not empty. This house was full of the woman I had been, the girl I had forgotten, the mother who had given too much, and the grandmother who had finally taken her place. I knelt beside the rosemary and ran my hand through its leaves. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't triumphant. I was whole. When they called me an extra mouth to feed, they hoped I'd vanish. But I learned to grow roots instead. And now, I feed myself. I feed others. I plant gardens where people once left silence. I write stories into walls no one can bulldoze. I was never the extra. I was the seed. And finally, I had bloomed. If Rose's journey reminded you of your own strength, your quiet battles, or the moment you finally stood up for yourself, leave a comment below. We see you. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories where dignity finds its voice and silence turns into legacy.